Our pace of living leaves us little time for leisure. Our program will give you a chance to experience the fascinating world of traveling, extreme adventures, hunting and fishing. Each week we will take you to the most beautiful places of Kazakhstan. Recently, we have finished the first part of our expedition to the valley of Boguty that is situated on the territory of the Charyn National Park. We climbed down the mountain ridges where we had watched wild goats and spent the night at the foot of the mountains. In the morning, we split up into two groups. One of the groups was set up to travel to the singing Barkhan in cars, and the well-known traveler and cameraman Maxim Levitin went kayaking down the river Charyn as far as the Ili river. The group traveling in cars needed to drive from the left side and on their way explore a part of the neighboring Sharyn Syugaty Valley up to Temerlik. Then the plan was to move along the Ili riverside and across the Manul game reserve and to the Ayak Kalkan isolated terrain feature. This famous tourist spot was planned a meeting place for both groups of our expedition. Traveling by water had to be done by Maxim alone, as there was no place for the second kayaker on the boat called Voxa 3. From experience, we could tell that this boat would not be enough for two for such a long trip. The capacity of the boat would be just fine for one kayaker, whereas two kayakers would have been too heavy for the boat to operate. Maxim started off near a bridge over the river Charyn. He had to cover more than 200 kilometers kayaking, 70 kilometers down the Charyn and 130 kilometers down the Ili river. And that's according to the map, where the rivers curve and ramble and only a GPS navigator will show how long it will take him to reach the destination. It may seem surprising that the upper part of the river Ili is the least populated area in the Almaty region. People usually occupy areas for living close to regular access to automobile roads, and the floodplain areas of the Charyn and the Ili are often inaccessible for any kind of transport in the winter and spring because of floods. Therefore, the banks of the Ili above Kapchagai are almost unpopulated. The river banks of Charyn are overgrown with thick riparian forest inhabited by pheasants. The wildlife of the Charyn forest dacha was made famous by the classic Kazakhstani animalist Maxim Zverev. We were hoping that Maxim would be able to quietly moor to the river bank and would be able to see wild boars, roe deers, badgers and other animals. The river Charyn is generally quiet, but at times it may be clogged by fallen trees, bushes and dead tree branches, which together with the fast stream makes the river very dangerous. A kayaker has to be alert well enough to manage the boat to avoid obstructions. Once our kayaker couldn't avoid a blockage. The boat didn't turn over, but the man lost an expensive camera that fell off his head into the water. The speed of the Charyn river stream is up to 15 km an hour. If you cut the route short, from Sartagai to the first settlement, Tashkarasu, the distance is 30 kilometers. But considering the river curves, you need to multiply this distance by 1.6, so the actual distance is 45 kilometers. We worked out with such speed of stream, it wouldn't take long to reach the settlement. But we were wrong. Numerous obstructions in the river made Maxim interrupt his boat and go around them by walking along the riverbank. On his way, he came across wild ducks, sandpipers, pheasants and 4 couples of black storks. These rare redbook birds inhabit floodplain areas of the Charyn. He arrived at the Tashkarasu settlement only on the following day in the afternoon, falling behind the schedule. On his way to the settlement, in 20 kilometers from Ash Tree Woods, on the riverbank, Maxim saw a tractor. The settlement's farmers were digging irrigation canals.
Вот так выглядит Charyn.
This is what the Charyn looks like down the canyon. That's how deep it is. I had to carry the boat walking. In the evening of day 2 of the trip, I managed to reach a railroad bridge. Despite the estimates, it was only possible to cover 40 kilometers of the route in the 2 days. It was difficult to move against the wind, and at one point Maxim thought to himself it would be impossible to go in the boat under the railway bridge, as the bridge is guarded. So it was necessary to bend the 1 kilometer area, as that territory is guarded. He had to walk across the steppe for at least 3 hours. Dust, wind and rolling tumbleweeds made it hard for Maxim to walk. Finding a place to spend the night was difficult too. He managed to find a spot near a poplar, which was robust enough to protect Maxim's tent from the strong wind. In the morning, the fierce wind dropped to 20 meters a second, but it was still dangerous for kayaking, not only because of the wind, but also because of the low level of water in the river. Eventually, by the evening, the wind had died down, so Maxim got down to exploring the wildlife of the Charyn floodplain areas. As he went further down the fast-flowing river, the river ran more slowly to let the kayaker continue the trip. The banks of the river, in some places, were covered with willow trees and desert poplars, turangas. On both sides of the river, there is the wide steppe with rising sandy dunes. This place is a natural habitat for the goitered gazelle, Charyn. It didn't take long to find the animal. After searching the gazelles for 1 hour, a female gazelle showed up, and later on we could see a male. In order to videotape them, the cameraman had to creep, hide and wait using the natural landscape features to hide and wait for a long time. On the way to the destination, we were lucky to see a fox stalking a Mongolian gerbil. Colonies of these cute rodents have densely populated these sandy areas in the valley near the Ili River. The further we were going towards the Ili floodplain area, the greener the landscape was. The riparian forest area near the water got thicker and wider. We didn't see cattle on the river banks anymore, but we could hear pheasants. The river looked different too. It became deeper and ran more slowly. In cane thickets, we suddenly heard a cracking noise and implied that I had scared a wild boar. It was getting dark when the Voxer reached the place where the Charyn flows into the Ili. We had to spend the night on a picturesque Barkhan covered with turanga trees. Down the Ili River from Burumbai to the Singing Barkhan, according to a map, it may take slightly more than 100 kilometers. But the actual distance is difficult to predict because the river has a lot of curves here. The river Ili is formed in the place of the inflow of the Kunges and Tekes rivers. The origin of the Tekes river is in the glaciers of Tian Shan on the territory of Kazakhstan. It flows into the territory of China, where it then flows into the Kunges and runs back to Kazakhstan as a wide and high river. Its length is 1,439 kilometers, of which 815 kilometers is in Kazakhstan. The Ili flows into the west part of Lake Balkhash, making its water dramatically desalinated. The first attempt to travel by boat along the Ili was made in 1871 by a merchant from Verny, former Almaty, Kuznetsov. He bought a wooden barge in Xinjiang, loaded the barge with wheat and went down the river Ili to the Ili settlement. Old Ilisk is situated 12 kilometers from modern Kapchagay. Kuznetsov covered 450 kilometers in 8 days. On the way back, he had to get his barge pulled by 10-day laborers, burlaks, who used ropes for that. They had to pull the barge all the way from Ilisk to Barahudzira, and that took 40 days. Afterwards, the exhausted team of those laborers refused to go on, and the merchant's idea to start a lucrative business failed, as to reach Kulja, they would have had to pull the barge another 40 days. But this failure didn't discourage another enthusiastic merchant. In 1882, an engineer Poplavsky ordered a 35 horsepower steam barge made of steel from London. This time, the attempt to go up Kulja and return loaded with cargo was successful. On one of its trips, however, the barge broke down and had to be pulled to the riverbank, where its remains were left for 2 decades. At the beginning of the 20th century, the well-known traveler Berg wrote that he had seen the remains of that barge near the river Ili. The Voksa kayaking boat has considerable advantages over a wooden barge. It weighs only 27 kilograms and has excellent performance, which allows the boat to increase its speed up to 18 kilometers an hour when going with the stream. As he lost a lot of time, to catch up with the planned pace, Maxim had to row more intensively. Surprisingly, the Ili river above Kapchagai is sparsely populated. On the right side, there were Aktau and Katetau mountains. Then we could see the big and small Kalkans. And on the left in the water, there were numerous cane thickets. And near the big Kalkan mountains is the border of the Charyn National Park. The second settlement we came across on our way within 100 kilometers belongs to the Manul game reserve. Several guest houses are situated near the Gidrometeo weather forecast service point, where we were met by Gennady, an old resident who has been working at this service point for a long time and has become part of the furniture here. 10 kilometers down the Manul game reserve, Maxim was frightened when he was preparing for the night. In the riparian forest, he literally bumped into a large boar. At night, having set a trail camera, we were hoping to videotape an interesting animal, the Central Asian otter. It's an extremely rare subspecies of the otter that used to be quite common in the mountain rivers of Jetesu. On muddy banks of the upper part of the river Ili, there are often distinct traces that belong to otters. In the morning, the camera showed no signs of the otter, but we managed to take a photo of this rare animal that morning, although from distance. Our trail camera managed to spot an alpine weasel, which is a subspecies of a common weasel that inhabits floodplain ecosystems. The alpine weasel, unlike the common weasel, doesn't change its color from yellow to white in the winter. On day 4, Maxim had to spend the night in 3 kilometers from the singing Barkhan. The Barkhan is situated on the territory of the Charyn National Park. When he went up the Barkhan, Maxim could hear it and could see the Barkhan from a different perspective, as he had been walking up the hill from the side of the river, not from the roadside like many tourists. In 2 kilometers from the singing Barkhan, there is an oxbow lake. Because of the too low level of water of the river, these large trees have died and now look like Japanese mystical bonsai trees. These trees have become home for a colony of cormorants. Some of them seem to have hatched their chicks. And below the Barkhan there was a flock of swans grazing near the water. We were supposed to meet Maxim at the Ayak Kalkan tract, but the spring floods made it hard to approach the riverside. Fortunately, at the top of the Barkhan, we were able to connect with Maxim through a mobile. We rearranged the meeting 10 kilometers down the river at a gamekeeper's place at Vasily's. Getting to the place was not easy either. We had to drive across frequent fords. Our combat off-road UAZ vehicle was durable enough to overcome the obstacles, but the way back was even harder. It started raining, which made our route worse. When going across one of the fords, our car got stuck in the water that covered the car up to the windscreen. The car engine coughed for a few times and stopped. It was apparent that we wouldn't be able to start it on our own, and it would make a while to get a tractor to pull the car out of the ditch. While we were waiting for the tractor, we saw a tolai hare. It ran towards us and sat by the road near the car, looking at us with curiosity, and then ran away. In 1 hour the tractor arrived. A local farmer agreed to help us out. Hooked with a tow line, our car eventually got out of the hole. The tractor pulled it to the paved road. We had to push the car on our own to get the engine started. Luckily, the car that had seen better days didn't let us down, and we managed to return to the city, although we got the feeling it would break down with its engine coughing.